good evening, and welcome to our conversation this evening about the French presidential elections. I have with me to discuss the issues around the French presidential elections Lady Michelle Renolf, who is an advocate of free inquiry and has had plenty to do with both France and Iran. And I also have with me Professor George Lambrakis, who is a former diplomat and also at the international university here in the Schiller International University. I'm sorry. So let me, without further ado, introduce you to some of the presidential candidates that are running in the election that is going to be held on Sunday of this week in 2 days' time. We have, as the front runner in the elections, we have Nicolas Sarkozy, who is a centre-right candidate who has, throughout the elections, been the principal, been the lead runner, but he has frequently been very closely followed by Ségolène Royal, who is the centre-left candidate for the Socialist Party, who has been trying to raise issues of the welfare state and strengthening pensions. We have also in third place at the moment previously a very outside candidate who has during the election been coming up, a man called François Bayrou, who is a centre candidate. And we have again the Monsieur Le Pen, who is of the National Front, the more right-wing party, who was extremely successful in the last elections, and who is hoping again to get into the second round of the presidential elections. Those are the four top runners. There are a number of others who are standing in this election, including more left-wing candidates, the Green Party, another centre candidate, and others. But those are the four key ones. So I wanted to kick off really with Michelle and ask you, Michelle, what do you see as the key issues that are going to determine who is going to win on Sunday?
Well, I would hope that the key issues would be recognising what is determining the foreign policies in these countries, because if we don't pay attention to the prompt for these foreign policies, all else falls by the wayside in terms of our own interests. And I speak in terms of all our nations, not just France. And I think this is part of the problem that we have in determining what is the New World Order and who opposes it and why. And I would particularly like to focus on the main candidate that you speak of, Sarkozy, and also Le Pen, because I see them as representing the two aspects that interest me most. And that would probably be, when we come to it, that will probably be my...
Grant. We will certainly be coming to the foreign policy aspects, because I think that is what interests certainly me and our audience. But it has been said by many within the media that foreign policy has had very little influence on the debate up to now. There has been a focus on unemployment, on the state of the French economy, on immigration, but issues that appear at least to ignore the foreign policy aspect.
Well, yes, because it suits our occupied media, as I would describe it, to avoid our confrontation with the reality of the foreign policy and what is this pro-Zionist movement which allows us no democracy, frankly, in our media and in our decision-making, because we are not given both sides of the debate, as it were. We actually, in France, imprison people if they want to make free inquiry and research. And of course, I'm referring to Professor Faurisson, who is currently awaiting his sentence for actually speaking to the Sahar television, not in France, but it happened to be broadcast in France. And as your viewers may know, there are 10 countries, which includes France, in which you may not discuss the topics that Professor Faurisson spoke of with Sahar. And his case comes up, his appeal comes up at the end of May, in which we will find out how democratic is France.
Thank you. Thank you. George, could you describe what you think are the key issues that are being discussed and will determine the election on Sunday?
Well, contrary to Michel, I don't think foreign policy is the issue for most of these people. And most of the French that have been commenting on it don't think so either. I think the issues you already laid out, such as immigration, such as basically work, the ability to hold a job, the unemployment, particularly of many people there. There are specific issues that relate to each of the main candidates. And to some degree, this has become an issue of personalities. And as Ms. Ockrent said in one of her comments on this, she's a prominent French commentator, I think she's absolutely right that a lot of the voting will be really on the basis of who you like, or particularly who you don't like, with negative ideas beginning to become a regular thing in a country such as France that in theory prides itself on being very reasonable and thinking grand ideas. I think the domestic issues now are very important, and it is true that they are being put forth as Anglo-Saxon versus us French, and that is really short speech for a more liberal economy, for the idea of the 35-hour week, whether it will remain or not. Sarkozy has said he's going to do something about it. There is a lot of talk about how you allow various companies to hire people without having to pay high costs from them from day one, and therefore allowing them to take chances. The idea of being able to fire people more freely would be one of the right as opposed to the left. And I think the most interesting thing about this election is the kinds of people, for once, because you have the first woman ever running for president. You also have Mr. Bayrou, who is a strong third-party candidate, which has not really ever happened before, although we know that a few years ago when we had the last election, Mr. Le Pen came in, and he was a third-party candidate that nobody expected to come in. Now we have 4, but Bayrou has real chances.
And the interesting thing is that he's actually from a weak party. He's a strong individual in the arithmetic of the presidential election, but his party does not normally
I think
have
his
support.
strength comes from the fact that both the right and the left have found it necessary to move towards the center. Ségolène Royal, as well as Sarkozy, have had this problem of how they keep their own voters, but still manage to appear central enough to counter Bayrou's sudden appearance and strong showing so far. And it's very interesting that if by chance Bayrou became the other candidate with Sarkozy in the second election that's coming up, he might have very good chances of winning simply because he would get all the left-wing votes that Ségolène Royal would no longer be able to control. So in a sense, one of the interesting things is that Sarkozy, who in theory is against Ségolène Royal, has had an interest in making sure that she gets into the second round, where most people think he would probably win.
And just to clarify, the elections on Sunday, unless one of the candidates gets more than 50% of the vote, will not determine the election in and of itself. It will mean that all the candidates bar 2 are knocked out, and then there is a completely new election, just to confirm.
Sure.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.